Welcome back to the Tuesday night podcast. Jeff Erickson here with Fred Zinke, and we are going to cover 5 early round players that Fred Zinke thinks that you'll be a total idiot to draft. Okay, maybe not that strongly spoken. That and a lot more coming up on the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball Podcast. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball Podcast. Jeff Erickson here with Fred Zinke after a long, cold winter. It's still cold in Toronto, and it's pouring rain here, so it's kind of winter here. How are you doing, Fred Zinke?
I'm good, and it hasn't been that cold in Toronto. It has been unusually warm this winter. I have not shoveled my driveway yet.
Wow.
Isn't that wild, eh?
It is wild.
And I'm not going to for the next, I don't know, who knows, like at least week to 10 days.
Yeah.
So it's above the freezing mark like every day lately. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I'm enjoying it. I'm loving it.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah.
I bet.
Not a skier, so.
No. Yeah. Let's jump right into it. Let's talk a lot of baseball here. We'll talk Toronto at some point. We'll talk Reds at some point, but want to just get right into it here and lessons that we've learned for 2023 that you're ready to apply to this season. Number one from you is get enough power. So I'm asking you, Fred, to define that for me. What does it mean to get enough power?
I guess I haven't totally put a number to it. I should probably do that before I start drafting, but that's more of a personal thing for me. Is that last year, most of my teams, their weakest category was the home runs category, not always the RBI category, because you can have a team that just accumulates RBI through, just a lot of plate appearances, but for most of my teams, they finished their low, whether they finished poorly in home runs or average in home runs, but most of them, their worst category was home runs. So for me personally, I need to draft more home runs this year. I also found home runs fairly hard to find on the waiver wire in comparison to steals, which was a change with the extra steals last year. I found you could find some guys I felt like who could steal you a base next week, but maybe not power hitters. So I just think for me, the takeaway is like, you have to review your last year's teams. Like for someone else, it could be totally the opposite, where they finished poorly in steals last year, or maybe they finished poorly in saves or strikeouts, or who knows. But for me, it was home runs. So this year, hopefully, I'm already starting. So like we'll maybe get to this at some point, but we were just picking like our labor draft spots, which is in 2 weeks from tonight. We were picking those through email today, and in Tout Wars, I picked my draft spot yesterday. It starts 2 weeks from today. So just even me starting to think about those things, I started to look at like, how can I get some base of power in the early rounds, which I don't think means like I have to start my draft with Judge and Alonso or something, but some base of power in the early rounds.
Right. And you know what I think that does mean too is maybe that you sacrifice a top line closer, or you go with 3 starters instead of 4 in the first 12 rounds or whatever. I think that's what it translates. You definitely don't go and get like the stolen base only guys. You maybe don't draft Estuary Ruiz, instead draft somebody else that has a modicum of power and get your steals elsewhere. Because it's tough it's when you don't get enough power, or at least unless you're getting like the dominant power guys at the top, it's really tough to make up for the lack of, where a roster spot where you're getting 0 power from it.
Yeah, for sure. So I didn't have a lot of the Estuary Ruiz types. I did have Nico Horner on a lot of teams, which is a lot of speed and not much power. I felt like I had like a lot of really balanced guys, but no sluggers. And like maybe I needed like at least 1 or 2 sluggers in there. With a lot of balanced guys, I tended to come out ahead in steals.
Okay.
I had maybe a lot of like 15-15 type guys even later in my draft, but just never like, instead of a 15-15 guy, like never just like a kind of a one-dimensional 30 homer guy or something later in the draft. Like I had no Jorge Soler types. Instead, I'd have a bunch of 15-15 guys, and those 15-15 guys are probably just as valuable as Jorge Soler, but it just made me slanted too much towards steals. Most of my teams finished, maybe didn't win steals, but were pretty close to it.
Well, and that's just the thing is with the stolen base environment where it took more steals to get our points in categories. Yeah, you become more cognizant in the draft, but almost like you can become too cognizant of it. Chris Liss always used to say when a category is plentiful, you need more of it, but at the same time, man, you just if you focus on it there too much, I feel like you're sometimes costing yourself. So, and plus home run guys, the other takeaway is power guys, home run guys. They can every home run is a 4 category event. It helps your batting average too. Where every stolen base is a 1 category event, maybe 1.25 if it helps you get a run scored. But we've seen plenty of high stolen base guys that don't score a ton of runs either. So I try to avoid the pure stolen base artists. I say this all the time, and then I end up wondering why I'm short in steals. It's one of those things. I think it's an interesting take there, and I have to set like some targets there. I have to do my annual article on NFBC 15 and 12 team targets for 80th percentile, 70th percentile, 50th percentile. Do that. I know there's some people other people out there that do that too, but I still like to do it for myself just so I know. Putting in the work myself helps me kind of conceptualize what I need, and I need to get on that. So that's something I'm going to probably do this week. I'll say one lesson for me is, similar. I take 2 years ago, I had some main event teams that did very well, and I always had good starting pitching in those leagues. Last year, I felt like I was short. Like I was always trying to stream pitchers. Streaming pitchers was a disaster last year. So I can't get enough good starting pitching early. I might take one closer, or maybe I'll take two and just add the draft and worry about fabbing more later, and making sure that I have 7 to 10 starters coming out of the draft that I can comfortably use, and maybe 6 to 7 ones that are almost evergreen, and 3 or 4 more that I can stream in according to the matchup. Instead of doing it where I'm trying to find them off the waiver wire, start with more starting pitching.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. Like again, like if that was a weakness for you last year. So Jeff, I'm assuming you still did your own projections this offseason?
Yeah, well, yes, with the caveat that we have it automated to get 3-year weighted averages as a starting point, gotcha. And then I can play around with it from there. But obviously, like a prospect that's played 1 year, that's not going to do any good. So I spent more time going through all those earlier on too. Mm-hmm. I'm still tweaking it a lot. Every day, if you go to our projection changes pages, you'll see that there's been a lot of changes made.
Yeah, this time of year for sure. So what I was going to say about that is, like you and I have talked about this in the past, but like if you make your own projections and if you use SGPs, what I really had to rethink, and this would be the same with you for the pitchers, I really had to think like what my SGPs were for each category. Yeah. Because now you and I have played this game for so long. So like, for example, like for me in hitting, the steals environment had changed over the years where the Billy Hamilton types kind of disappeared. And then the steals bar became super low. So my SGPs had to change with it because there were very few steals. So a few steals makes up, more difference in the category. But then now there's more steals again. So I think I didn't keep up with that well last year with my SGPs. So what I ended up doing is going back and looking at my old, which is cool that you can do this. I went back and looked at my old spreadsheets from 10 years ago and 12 years ago and things like that when the offensive environment had more steals. And I looked at what my SGPs were for steals, for home runs, etc., for batting average, for RBIs back in those days. So I actually went back and looked at like my first Tout Wars season and the spreadsheet I had made for that. And then like, again, looked up 2012, 2011, I think was my first one, 2012, 13, 14. And then, so what I need to really do is recalibrate how I rated players for this offensive environment. And it's the same thing for pitching. Like ERAs are up a little bit, whips are up a little bit because of some of the rules. So you have to change like how you're assessing hitters and how you're assessing pitchers to make sure. Like, I think one of my problems last year is I had hitters too much valued for an offensive environment that lasted from, I don't know, say like 2018 to 2022, when there were hardly any steals and a fair amount of power. Think about 2019, the happy fun ball year, like all those home runs, right? But not many steals. So I think one of the things for those who do use, whether they do their own projections or whether they just grab Steamer or something like that, like if you're going to use any sort of weighting to it, you have to make sure you're weighting it for this offensive environment and not the one that we had prior to 2023.
I have to say though, this spring is like their first normal spring in like forever.
It's amazing. I'm so happy
There's
about
no, like, there are some like minor tweaks of the rules, but
it.
there's no major rule changes this
Yeah.
year. There's no lockout. There's no shortened season. There's no happy fun ball that we're coming off of.
That we know of.
Right. Well, yeah, it might, we might get a happy fun ball.
Get a new happy fun ball. Yeah.
But we're not coming off of a season of happy fun ball.
Yeah.
So
this was the most I've enjoyed doing my projections maybe in a few years for that reason. Like I felt like I could take last season, look at a 162 game landscape, and then project the landscape to be similar. So now it was just looking at each player and how I felt like the player might be different this year. But yeah, like we've talked about, like whether it was shortened seasons or changes in rules or whatever, baseball changes, like it just felt like we could never have 2 years in a row that were similar. Maybe we will this year. The players won't be similar, but the MLB, runs scored,
the environment will hopefully be very similar. Yeah,
hopefully.
Yeah, that's right. Question in the good question from Uncle Ted in the chat room. What's the difference between making projections and just building your draft queue? I think that's, a lot of people, most people don't do their own projections. And maybe, and I know like colleagues in the industry, some colleagues in the industry think that's a waste of time to do projections. Like Ray Flowers, for instance, has made that case, or at least certainly I think there's a danger in being overly reliant on a projection, because a projection is just one fixed number. And it's a starting point for a conversation. And I feel like that's one of the problems I might have, is I get like too rigidly adhered to, like, my projection and my valuation formula and the ranking that spits out, as opposed to just ranking the players. And either way, you got to do your own rankings, and I think that's important that you do have your own queue, Ted. I think that's good that you do that, but I think there is a difference there. Letting your, like, do your projections drive your rankings, or do your rankings drive your projections?
Oh, my projections drive my rankings, because without my projections, like it's hard to rank the players just by eye, like player, you know what I mean? Like player X is, you think is going to hit 30 home runs and steal 7 bases. And player Y, you think is going to hit 15 home runs and steal 12 bases or something. You know what I mean? And then you're like, how do those compare? And then again, you throw in the other categories. And agreed that you can't get too married with your projections, because obviously they're not perfect.
Right.
And if someone said to me, for example, like, Fred, you can't project players better than Steamer, you might as well just use the Steamer projections, for example, or the BAT or whatever. Okay, sure, maybe. For me, it's the process in creating the projections.
Right. Yes.
Like by the end of creating my projections, which takes me like a month, from maybe like around Christmas until late January, and then tweaking them all the way through from now until opening day, like you get to know the player pool so well. So like before I can project any player, I have to look, what were his stats the last few years, and then beyond that, what was his hard hit rate or average exit velocity, or all these things, right? His injury history, and then I come up with projections for him. And are the projections perfect? No, but the process has allowed me every offseason to refamiliarize myself with every single player in the draft pool,
right? And especially with players that are new to the draft pool, or relatively new. Guys that get the call up, or what's worse is trying to get guys that haven't hit the majors yet. Players from foreign leagues. Your Blue Jays have a guy, Rodriguez, the pitcher that's from Cuba that has spent some time in Japan, didn't pitch anywhere last year. Trying to fashion a projection for that guy, pretty impossible. That's a fool's errand. Because I don't even know what his role is going to be. They say they want him to start, but he hasn't even taken a physical yet. They're also fending off trade offers for Manoah, and if Manoah is a starter, there's no room in the rotation. Point is, like, for AL Tout Wars, I need to know that guy. If I'm in a 10-team mixed league home league, I don't need to know that guy, at least right away. But the problem is, I'm doing it for different universes there, and we're going through like 800 to 1,000 players. And then you're like, oh, I don't know about that. And so that's where I think sometimes, like, oh, well, maybe I just don't want to draft him now. So I'll do a projection that's a little bit lower in the rankings, a little bit there. Or maybe it's the other way around. Like, I didn't realize this guy rates that high for me all of a sudden. I didn't think I'd be that high on him, but here he is. I'll give you an example. Matt McClain. My projection on him had me way above where he was going. and where I even had him a little bit. And I was like, but the same thing is like, I look at the number, I look at the projection. I'm like, yeah, well, I still like him. I mean, maybe I'll temper that a little bit. I know I can get him a little later, but okay. Well, if he's sitting there at pick 50 for me, well, I'm going to take him there.
Yeah, and one of the first things, once I'm done my initial run through of projections, so take that month or so, and do say 500-600 players. The next thing I do is compare my projections to the early NFBC ADP, and I look, and then I go back. The very next thing I do is I go back and take a second look at all the players who I'm especially high on. So I look and I'm like, okay, who do I have? And it's as simple as just on the spreadsheet, I have them all ranked, from first to last, how valuable I think they are. I put the NFBC ADP in one of the columns, and I'm like, okay, who sticks out? And then I go back and double check those players to see, like, okay, did I miss something? Because the market's pretty smart, right? So if I'm way out of line on someone, I'm like, and that, we'll talk later, I think, about the Reds infield. And so for example, someone like Matt McLain, do I see playing time competition for certain players or a crowded situation? Do I want to lower for some, like the foundation of your projections is, first of all, is playing time. So that wouldn't apply really to Matt McLain, but it did apply to Christian Encarnacion Strand when I started looking at Reds, for example, and how crowded that infield was. So that's my next step always, is to see who am I out of line with with the industry on, and am I comfortable with that? And some years there'd be certain players where I'm like, yeah, I'm comfortable. I'm gonna have this guy in like 80%, 70% of my teams, because I see better than what the industry's seeing. And then there's players who I see way worse than the industry does. So I think that, like, all that whole process, it takes time, but it's time well spent. Like for me, if I didn't do all those things, I just don't know what I would do. Like just sit and like randomly look at players and start moving them around to rank them. Like that feels so inexact. So kind of just willy nilly.
And then you probably find yourself slated to ADP when you do that too, because then
I think I would either do my own projections or almost just do nothing and just take the streamer projections and stick them into a spreadsheet and use the SGP, or you know what I mean, or grab a calculator like from RotoWire that says this is how much these guys are worth, and I'm like, okay, well, I'll just use that and wiggle them around for my own likes and dislikes or whatever. So I just feel like if you're going to do it, if you're going to get to know these players, then let's go all the way. Let's get to know them all the way, with understanding that my projections may not be better than ones you can get, readily available at sites like RotoWire. But through the process, now I know why I want to draft a certain player.
Indeed. We're going to talk a little LABR and our draft spots for the mixed labor draft. That is coming up, Fred, in 2 weeks on February 20th. So we'll be talking about that. But before we do that, got to share news with from our good sponsor, Fantrax. And Fantrax, by the way, is going to be sponsoring all of our draft season podcasts. We're big fans of them. We thank them for their sponsorship. Fantrax is the most customizable fantasy platform in the industry, offering the greatest fantasy experiences for your dynasty, keeper, redraft, and best ball leagues. Coming from another service, Fantrax makes it easy. Fantrax can import any of your current leagues and customize if needed. In fact, I'm in a Stratomatic league. We're moving over to Fantrax this year, and it's a crazy league. It's 30 teams. We go mega deep, and they can handle it. It's really kind of awesome that they do that there. So very in-depth player pool. I mean, they handle all these dynasty leagues, so they got all sorts of minor league players in there, customizable for that. Tout Wars uses them for live drafts as well, for live online drafts. A lot of customization that they offer: waivers, categories, scoring system, schedule, you name it, they offer it, and it's all free. Sign up for free today and be entered to win an official MLB signed jersey for Vladimir Guerrero Jr. Simply go to fantrax.com/RotoWire and sign up today. That's FANTRAX.com/RotoWire. Fantrax, the home of fantasy sports. All right, guys. We're talking about LABR. First of all, thank you again, Fantrax, for your sponsorship. We started the Kentucky Derby style method of finding our draft slots today, Fred. And I had the third choice. The top two choices went 1, 2. I was uncreative. I went with the third pick. You had the sixth choice. The people intervening went 5 and 6. So you had the opportunity to go right next to me. And sure enough, you did. You're right next to me. You're in the 4th slot. It's going to make for a great live draft. We're going to do I think what we've done the last 2 years, we'll continue to do, where we live stream our draft, at least the first part of it there. and we're going to be sniping each other left and right.
Yeah, pretty much. So are your projections, are they publicly available? Can I just grab those and then
Yeah, you can.
in the second, fourth, sixth, and eighth rounds, I'll just grab the guys.
Sure. And I rigidly adhere to them. So
I think
because there's
grabbing
no
someone else.
nuance in a categorical league. It's straight
Could you,
value, baby.
and
Straight
could you
butter.
imagine after all the hours I spent on my own projections, just grabbing someone else's, and that would be that would probably be not the right means to an end for me. So no, I think you taking the third pick made sense. I think that's fine. We'll see if the third picks go the same as they do, say, on the NFBC ADP with Acuna, Witt, and Rodriguez. We'll see. There's some really good guys. Like there's that next tier of Betts and Carroll.
I think it changes right at 2. I think everybody's got a different 2 or 3. Like
yes, yeah.
I'll tell you, Julio Rodriguez is my 2, but I can see the case for Carroll. I can see the case for Witt. I could see the case for Strider. I really could. Yep. But by taking 3, I'm kind of committed to not taking Strider there. So we'll see how I'm going to handle pitching. I did a NFBC platform Draft Champions League with all the speakers in First Pitch Arizona, where I had the 7th spot where I took Strider. So I've already got one share of Strider somewhere there. I'll tell you what, life is so nice when you have Spencer Strider and his 250 plus strikeouts. It opens up the door to do a lot of different things, but it also opens up the door to have a player that can go 5 categories on offense too.
Yeah, for sure. And Strider's kind of a man on an island right now, is like the only first round, lock pitcher this year, which is kind of unusual. I think I wasn't surprised. I know you like picking in the middle.
I do too. I do.
So I wasn't surprised you took third, but I wouldn't have been shocked to see you take 7th or something like that. And there is a lot of depth of hitting this year. Like you look at the guys going in the middle, like Kyle Tucker, Freeman, Tatis, Soto, like those guys all go like from 6 to 10. So those guys are all really good. Like,
yeah, they are.
Like there's not much separating them. Julio Rodriguez is cool because he's really young and has already had a couple good seasons, but those other guys are all really good too. So I kind of wondered if you would take in the middle. And then when it came to me, 1, 2, 3, 5, and 6 were gone. So I kind of debated 4 or 7, right? Do I want to sit in the middle or do I want to go earlier?
Right.
In the end, it wasn't the first round that swayed me to go earlier. It was more that I was interested in being around the 2-3 turn. I just liked, at least on the ADP list, I kind of liked a lot of the players that went from, say, about 25 to 35.
Yes.
So I was like, okay, I'm going to sit in that 2-3 turn and get 2 of those guys. It wasn't actually about picking 4th. In fact, I didn't really care that much if I don't get Acuna, like I didn't care that much where I picked in the first round. It was more about planning out my 2nd and 3rd round.
Absolutely agree on that.
Yeah.
And the thing, I'll even go one step farther and say, like, I don't think there is much of a difference between picking 22 versus 28. I think that I'm not losing anything. Granted, I think there's structural reasons, and Ariel Cohen and I have talked about this before, about liking the middle for other reasons. Like just the whole concept of bargains tend to slip more towards players in the middle. Because if you're at an end and you like a player, you don't think he's coming back to you, you have a tendency to reach for that player or reach for a category or reach for a position. And that allows bargains to fall to people. I've seen it happen. I've benefited from it before. So that was a consideration. And that was more the reason why I would have gone 7 or 8 if I was going to go that way. But I ultimately decided I was basing it more on the top 3 rounds, like you said.
Yeah. The 3rd round, it was really interesting to me. And that was what ended up swaying my decision. Once you hit about pick 30 by ADP, once you hit about pick 37, like most of the next 10 picks are pitchers. There's a few hitters in there, but they're almost all pitchers. So the second half of the 3rd round is almost all pitchers. So I think I looked at that group and thought, like, do I want to pick 7th? At which point I'm probably taking one of those pitchers in the 3rd round.
Yeah.
Unless one of the few hitters in there I really love, but that was a little bit, I felt like earlier in the 3rd round, I felt like there were still some hitters I liked based on ADP at that point. And then you can always just jump one of those hitters that goes from 37 to 45 and just take them 34th. That's no big deal. So like it's not a massive reach. So that was some of the strategy. I also looked at even the 4-5 turn, and I think after that it's pretty much a crapshoot. But I think up to there, the ADP usually holds like a little bit. So we'll see when the actual draft gets started. But it was interesting. Usually it's the first round that drives my decision, but this year it really wasn't, because when I was finished my projections, it's like, other than Acuna, I guess you could, like, if you really like Witt, I get it, or Rodriguez. If you think those guys are really young, so if you think they're going to take like a big step forward again, Witt was pretty great last year too, and Rodriguez in the second, half, not in the first half, but in the second half. But based on them being young, you could think they're going to take a big step forward. But after that, Corbin Carroll's ceiling is like really high.
It is.
Absolutely. And then guys like Betts and Freeman, like, how can you go wrong? They're awesome every year. The Dodgers lineup is great. Like, they're not that old yet. Like, they're maybe a little bit past their prime. Like, there's just a lot of options there. Like Judge and Soto, look like they'll probably be great together. Maybe some health issues with Judge. He's been hurt some years, but that's a really good pair. Trey Turner's down there at the second half of the first round. He was a top 2-3 pick last year.
Right.
In most leagues, and you can get him way down at 12. So I didn't feel like after Acuna was gone, I didn't really care that much about where I picked in the first round.
Let me ask you, how much of a gap was there between Acuna and your number 2 player?
Like, so much.
The biggest gap I've ever seen between 1 and 2.
Me too. This is the most dominant. There's other years where the whole industry has agreed kind of that somebody should go first. But not to this degree. Not to this degree. That's it. Right. Not to this degree. I'd have to go back and look at all my old spreadsheets. But yeah, never. There's years, I think, where everybody agreed Albert Pujols should go first or something like that. But not to this degree. So
I had a total of 4 SGP difference between 1 and 2, and that translates to almost $13 in fantasy value.
And I think last year, because I've been doing a lot of article writing lately, I think last year on the earned auction value calculator, I think he was like $25.
Yeah, this is a tempered projection for me. Like, I've got him for like 55 stolen bases. He had 80, last year.
Yeah. So it's almost like, it's like he will, based on projections, it's like he's going to finish first if he doesn't get hurt. Mm-hmm. It's just by how much. Right. So, that's how I see it too, is he's going to finish first. It'll just be whether he finishes first by $5 or $15 or $20. But he is what's the stat? Like, a third of players spend time on the IL. Right? Like, he's awesome, but he's still a baseball player. Like, he could spend time on the IL and not finish first. Here's a fun one and I've already been asked this in an article. To finish first, would you take Acuna or the field?
It's still the field, but it's a lot closer than I've ever answered that.
Yeah, for sure. Every other year I would take the field without a moment's thought. This year I would still take the field, but because again, like one high ankle sprain and he misses 6 weeks or something, and the field wins. So
exactly.
Or all of a sudden he just announces partway through the year, I don't need to steal so many bases. Like, I got to pace myself. I got to be a little careful. And all of a sudden he steals 40 and the field wins. So but anyways, we just haven't seen this where, someone who's maybe not the best hitter in baseball, but really close, is also the best base stealer.
Yeah. It's really crazy. Like, he's 100th percentile in exit velocity and stolen, not sprint speed, by the way, but still stolen bases and pretty much everything
else he hits. And then he hits leadoff, and then he hits on the team that scored the most runs last year.
Yeah. So in a great ballpark, and
and they still have their entire offense back. So you can't even be well, that was last year. We'll see. Sure, we'll see, but they have every piece on that offense that's important locked up.
Right.
For a really long time. So I don't know. I just see. Yeah.
And it's one thing to say to take the field, but it's another thing to identify who that other person is. And that's where the overwhelming odds are. Usually I wouldn't care about. I did get a first pick in one of my first NFBCs, an NFBC 50 12-teamer league. And it's so I rather have saved that my run good for a main event, to be honest with you. But then again, who knows? He might get hurt or something like that. So who knows? One thing that we always have to talk about, and we won't go in to depth. We'll do more broad strokes on this. Is what's your closer plan for this year. I'll address it. I'll frame it in saying like this. I think there are more reliable closers than there have been in a long time. Like I feel like it's more stability at the position that we've had and than we've had in recent years. So knowing that, how are you handling closers this year?
So I was a little surprised at how early closers have gone, and maybe that's because it's draft champion season, but I don't
Yeah.
know. I don't know. We'll see. Because I felt like I said that last year, but then it didn't really change that much.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm a little surprised because, like you said, like last year was like a super stable year for closers compared to what we've seen in a lot of recent years. A lot of closers held their jobs, and then a lot of those closers have now held their jobs through the offseason into this year. So we've got a lot of pitchers who were a closer last year and were successful and are back as their team's closer this year. Then on top of that, we've got Edwin Diaz coming back, and there's no real reason to doubt that he can come back. And then we've got some other pitchers, like say Andres Munoz, who are like who we've already established themselves as really good relievers, and now look like they're ready to be like they have a clear path to being the closer. So we've got other guys who you feel like maybe they haven't done it, but the skill they've done it as far as pitching really well as a reliever. Now they just get to do it in the ninth inning. So there's more, I think, comfortable options than there ever been. But I'm
Mm-hmm.
still seeing a lot of closers in the top 50 or 60 picks. I don't know if I'm going to take any of those. I'm kind of
Yeah.
leaning no. I'm not really
Yeah.
doing draft champions this year. I'm just going to do a lot of fab leagues, and I'm kind of leaning no on taking all those closers. But
I think that's a common sentiment. I
they're
will
still
say,
going, so someone's taking them.
yeah, but honestly, they're going around later. Like we saw
Yeah,
closers going in the
yeah.
second and third, early third. And Devin Williams is the first closer off the board according to ADP in the last month. And his ADP is 44. And this is 139 drafts. There is, min picks 26, so it still happens, but he also has a max picks of 95. That seems aberrant, like it's a weird type of league, and that may be throwing things off. Maybe it's a like what's their format that I'm trying to think of here? Their points league format that they have. Cut line.
Right.
Maybe it's the cut line that's
Maybe.
coming from. If we strip that out, maybe that would change things a little bit there, and that's driving that down a little bit. But yeah, I've been saying that I don't want to take one of the first two or three closers. That means I'm not getting Devin Williams, I'm not getting Edwin Diaz, and I'm probably not getting Josh Hader. I actually have Hader as my number one closer. He's going on average as the number 3 closer so far. But either way, I'm probably not going to pay that price. We'll see. I mean, labor is a different animal. Maybe I'll, because we can trade closers, so that actually probably pushes them down for me in value. Now it doesn't raise it, but other leagues maybe I'll value it a little bit more.
Yeah, I think maybe also part of the reason that, like you said, it's a round difference from like where we were seeing some of them last year to this year. A lot of closers did really well last year. There is no healthy closer who got 100 strikeouts, for example, last year. There's just Felix Bautista. So, like, there's a lot of closers who had really good years, but like, and Devin Williams had a great year in the sense of he got 8 wins on top of the 36 saves. I don't think anyone's really who's smart about fantasy baseball getting too caught up in, closers repeating win totals. So like he maybe had the best year. He had 87 strikeouts, which is really good, but not like what we've seen. Like we've seen some years where a closer gets the 35 saves and like 117 strikeouts or something like that. And then if you project that again over to the next year or something similar, the rate, like the where he ranks on your list just like blows everyone out of the water. So we don't really have that. Emmanuel Clase had the really high save total, but didn't pitch that great.
Right.
The other guys at the top of the list, like David Bednar, you're not picking the Pirates closer in the third round of a draft. Like you're just not. He's good.
He's not going that high though.
No, he's not. That's what I mean. They're like, these guys aren't options. These are your save leaders from last year.
Yeah.
So we just didn't have a guy who last year got like 40 saves and 110 strikeouts. And we've had that some years.
Right.
We just didn't have that last year. Like I said, like Devin Williams had probably the best year because he had the best ratios. He's the only of the 35 save guys. He's the only one with an ERA under 2, and the only one with a WHIP under 1. So that's why he's number 1. But yeah, it looks like the closer pool is a good group of a lot of probably reliable closers.
Yeah,
And then it's like, are you going to pay a lot more for the extra reliability of Devin Williams than just waiting and taking Rizal Iglesias or someone like that? Not quite as good, not quite as reliable, but still pretty good. Still
for
probably going to
sure.
be fine.
Well,
So
and the other thing is we didn't have the runaway saves leaders and runaway dominant closers. We also had far fewer established closer disasters too.
that's it. Yeah. Yes.
So the pool was narrowed that way too.
Yep.
Um, and it may be a mistake to assume that that's going to continue this year. That might be the one thing I think one common mistake is we always replay the previous year, and whether it's closers or anything else, or in any sport, by the way, too. Fantasy football all the time. Well, this is the year of the running back, and then it turns out to be the year of the wide receiver, and that happens all the time. But you know what? We'll see about that. But I think there's like my pool of reliable closers is somewhere between 12 to 15, and I want to get someone around 8 to 10 among closers. So that means it's like an Alexis Diaz or a Paul Sewald or a Bednar. Aroldis Chapman being on the Pirates, maybe I'm slightly concerned about that, but we'll see. But yeah, I don't want to start a closer run. I don't want to get left completely behind. And maybe when it comes to main event, when we see that closer inflation come and it's real and spectacular, I'll get caught up in a little bit there. But I think I want to try to make sure I don't want to spend too early of an asset on that, because it's when you don't get enough starting pitching, when you don't get enough offense, those are harder to catch up on than closers. It sucks not hitting closers when you're fabbing them constantly and like, okay, I'm secure, I'm safe, this is nice, I don't have to worry about that. But usually it comes at the sacrifice of another spot there, and I don't really want to do that. We're going to talk about some Reds starting pitching players. You're talking about the roster crunch there, and it's real and it's spectacular. Before we do that, though, if you are listening to us on podcast form, this is where you're going to hear ads from our friends at the Blue Wire Network. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for Blue Wire for hosting our podcast. Blue Wire is a great company. We like their studios in the Wynn, actually, in Vegas, too. All right, let's talk Reds. Let's start off with our thumbnail picture. That is, if you're watching on YouTube, you saw this there. We don't hate Elly De La Cruz. I promise we don't. I'm a Reds fan. I love Elly De La Cruz. I don't love his cost. I don't love that he's going in the second round in 15-team leagues and even in 12-team leagues. Not with the risk that's involved in terms of batting average, roster, batting lineup spot. I think with the Reds' crowded infield, he is one of the players that is at risk of losing some playing time.
Yeah, he could. Well, he could. No one's going to take his playing time away, in my opinion. He will take his own playing time away. Right. So
the fact is, the Reds have options, though. They're not like
absolutely.
They can't like, oh, we gotta write it out. No, they don't have to. That's Ellie's problem. Here, and let's set the table here. In the last month, Elly De La Cruz's average draft position in the NFBC is 22, with a range of 12 to 38. I will take him at 38. I have him a little lower than that, even still, but I would consider it there.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's going to be an option for me in most leagues. I haven't seen it yet. I'm not in those leagues where he goes later so far. Maybe it'll happen in labor in 2 weeks from now. But for me, it's the strikeout.
Yeah, I was gonna say, have we seen a guy like this in the recent years? So like just to get a picture of how not good he was. In July, he hit 238 with a 686 OPS, and like below 700 is bad OPS. And then in August, he hit 198 with a 663 OPS. And in September, he hit 200 with a 619 OPS. Like he came up and played well in June, and then was like a really bad offensive player in those regards. Like as far as like he was a bad offensive player. If you want to say his base running made up for some things, how fast he was and the ability to generate runs, stealing bases and things like that. Like he was I don't know. There's not really much other way to put it. Like the Reds can probably find a guy off the street right now who could give them a 700 OPS, and he didn't do that in any of the last 3 months of the season. So so when I do projections for Elly De La Cruz, he does actually come out pretty high. It's just that when you look at those projections, like it's all downside after that. Like it's all downside. It's going to be hard for him to beat those projections. And at this point,
There's
and
still an upside beyond your projection, though. There is. There is. And here's the case in favor of him. Every single level that he's reached as a professional, he struggled initially and then got it. Second, pure speed. Third, pure power. Those things all exist. Fourth, he takes walks. That helps. That is something that I do like. I mean, I don't want a guy being overly passive and being confused, but at the same time, there's growth potential here. Remember, he was 21 years old. How many times have we seen year 1 to year 2 jumps? I mean, it does happen.
Yep.
That said, you're on second round price. You're paying for it. You're asserting that it will absolutely happen this year. All that said, I've got him as a 2040 guy this year still. I just don't have him as a, I have him hitting 249. That's an improvement, but that's still that's still like a price that's like a 4th round price in a 15-team league.
Yeah. He's also, because so much of his value is tied into steals. If you're going to draft him in the 2nd round, like, you're now going to plan your team a bit around him. So now you've got a 40 or 50 steal guy in the 2nd round. So he better come through, because you're not going to draft, you're going to draft more steals, but you're not going to draft tons of steals, because you don't need to run away with steals. So you don't need to draft him and 2 other 40 steal guys. Like, you're going to run away with steals. There's no point in that. So if you're going to draft him, you're all in, because he better come through, because if he doesn't, you're not going to compete in steals. Like, if you draft him and he ends up going back to the minors or something, I don't know. It's just really interesting as a 2nd round pick, like, just as a guy who's being drafted around, like, great players. Like, he's being drafted in and around Devers and Seager and Lindor and Alonso.
Higher than those in many cases.
Right,
yes.
right. So, like, he's being drafted, Austin Riley, like, he's being drafted in with those players who are established stars. But I get it. Like, the projections say if he plays all year, he'll probably do that. Like, if he plays all year, he'll probably steal a really high amount of bases and hit 20 home runs. As long as his batting average doesn't totally kill you, if it's 240 or something like that, then sure, it can all work. It's just the risk is so great. Right.
We were saying a lot of this about Bobby Witt last year. I'm just going to throw that out there too.
Oh, absolutely. Bobby Witt was basically a 700 OPS guy as a rookie, and then took off last year because he moved up to being an 800 OPS guy. And that 100 points in your OPS jump is huge. And he roughly did that last year. And then by doing that, that gave him the ability to produce more home runs, more stolen bases. Like, he improved a lot. Can Elly do that? Like, we'll see. He's only, like you said, he just turned 22. Like,
is there a league format or a draft that start to your draft where he makes more sense to take an early chance on him? Like, like, and I'm trying to, like, Eric Halterman was on our Sirius XM show tonight, and he did a league where he went Acuna Elly and Elly at the 2-3 turn, thinking that, hey, I may just have stolen bases taken care of with those 2 players. I'm going to get some from these other guys. Maybe it makes more sense to take a chance there, or maybe it makes more sense to take a chance on him in a in a deeper league a little bit more, because he's got at that in that case there, maybe if you're picking him at the 2-3 turn, it's like 28, 29, 30, man, maybe there's just, it's harder to find difference makers. Maybe that's the argument, or maybe the opposite is true. I don't know. That's what I'm kind of fishing at. Is there a format? Is there a league size? Is there a draft strategy where he fits better than others?
Okay, so I would say, like, the place where he fits the easiest would be the 10-team leagues. Like if you want to take him in a 10-team league, he'd be like an early mid-third round pick. And there are a lot of those leagues out there. Like, I know they're not NFBC style leagues, but there's a lot of leagues out there like that. So he'd be like a 3rd round pick. If he hits, awesome. But your team's probably loaded with good players. The waiver wire is flush. If he doesn't really work out, you can grind away and get quality production at shortstop. Without him. And you look back and you're like, oh, I blew my 3rd round pick, but whatever. Like, I would made up for it. So that's the place where he's the easiest. Because just like I always say when I'm writing Yahoo articles, that in those Yahoo 10-team leagues, like, just go for it, because the waiver wire will be full of players. And if you strike out on some guys, drop them and you can pick other guys up. You're not replacing them in the other leagues. In a deeper league, he could win you the league. Like in an NL, let's go all the way to NL only tout where he'll go for 33 or 35 bucks. Like he could win you the league because if he takes off. But if he craps out, like it's tremendous. The loss of having like a $35 player who goes to the minors or something like that, or hits 210, like it's just debilitating. Like you're not going to win the league probably at that point. So if you believe in Elly, go for it. Like take him an NL tout because, like you said, like you get him for 33, and if everything hits on Elly, he could be 27 homers and 60 steals. Like he could be tremendous. So go ahead in NL tout if you believe in him, take him, and then but it's all or nothing at that point.
I'd say he's more valuable in categorical leagues than he is in head-to-head points leagues because the stolen bases just don't have as much value.
Yeah, even with the walks, for sure. He's a pure roto stud. Like he could lead the majors in steals this year, and we wouldn't be surprised. I don't think he will, but he could. Okay, let's look at the rest of this infield because
I was just going to say that.
Beyond Elly, I start getting confused.
Yes. Okay, so the Reds have copious depth. Matt McLain is there. I love Matt McLain. My initial values had McLain over Elly, by the way. Okay. I'm just going to throw that out there, but I tempered him a little bit recently just to knock down the batting average a little bit, but still Matt McLain is there. Jonathan India returns. A little bit out of favor with the team, but he's still going to play. They signed Heimer at Candelario this year in the offseason. Christian Encarnacion Strand is there. Noelvi Marte is there, and I love Noelvi Marte's skills. Really splashed in his debut. He had a higher prospect pedigree 2 years ago than Elly did. Now, Elly surpassed it last year, but still, Marte is a stud. Encarnacion Strand, all he did was hit as a Red. Yet, both of these guys aren't guaranteed playing time.
Yeah, so like, if you look at their Fangraphs page, for example, like Elly's playing, McLain's playing, Heimer Candelario was brought in. He's playing. Like
right, he got paid.
That's right. They brought him in. He's playing. So those three are playing. Marte's probably playing. Like if he plays well, he's probably playing. That leaves DH. So Jonathan India is your DH. Encarnacion Strand's on the bench. On Fangraphs, he's on the bench. Encarnacion Strand is too good to be on the bench.
I agree, and he will not be on the bench. Exactly. That's my prediction.
Yeah, like he held his own last year. Like when he came up, like first of all, he destroyed minor league pitching. Then he had an 805 OPS in 63 games with the Reds. And when you break it down, and again, this is what happens when you do your own projections. You start looking at where things. When he came up, he was just okay. In September, 986 OPS. Like things started. It looks like he started to get comfortable in the majors. Things started to take off for him in September. So, like he could just hit so well that they're just like, well, we got to play Encarnacion Strand. Sorry, Jonathan India, you're on the bench. Or hello, Jonathan India, grab an outfielder's glove and right.
This is why everybody projected India to get traded this offseason to help pitching help. Well, there's got to be a market for him. You know, someone's got to trade for him. You know, and the Reds aren't going to lowball it here. And that's the other thing. So that it's a problem. Noelvi Marte, this guy's a stud. I love Noelvi Marte. You know, this is a guy right out of the word go. He hit 316, 366, 456 in his major league debut. He had a 20% K percentage, 6.5% walk percentage. Okay, we'd like him to walk more, but he's making good contact. It's fine. He stole 6 bases in 35 games. He can hit for, he's coming off of an injury in winter league ball, and that may slow him in spring training a little bit. Something to watch for a little bit. That might be where they kind of, that might be ease the pressure point a little bit, but not much. And asking maybe Strand or maybe Strand goes to the left field. Spencer Steer's in left field.
Yep, you're not getting in there.
Yeah,
the outfield's crowded too. Spencer Steer's in left field. TJ Friedel had a good year. He's
their center fielder. He's the only guy that can play center, really, truly. I mean, Fraley can stand in center, but he's not really a center fielder.
And then they've got Fraley and Will Benson to.
Someone's got to sit there. I mean,
right.
So, and that's why I've downgraded Tyler Stevenson recently. DH is not open for him this year.
No,
he is not going to get any DH at bats, nor is he going to get first base at bats. I mean, that's the thing. The Candelario signing. I mean, the Reds are spending money. Candelario is a useful player. He's good, but he's not
It kind of didn't make any sense. Like, why wouldn't he
Right.
be a pitcher?
Unless there's
Parents spent
someone
money.
else getting traded. That's the thing.
Yeah.
I mean, even if it was like, I don't want them to trade CES. I love Encarnacion Strand, but if they got a stud pitcher back in return for him, okay, I get it. Now I see why that signing makes a little bit more sense. But until then,
Any
I,
chance Marte opens the season in AAA?
yes, because
Because
the
this is what teams
scenario
do.
is okay. He's hurt. He wasn't ready to play in spring training games to start. We need to get him some at bats. I see that lasting no longer than a month, though.
Well,
But
someone
yeah,
will be hurt. Someone will get hurt. Like,
or yeah, someone will get hurt, or Elly will slump. I mean, I do think Elly's got to get off to a good start. If he gets it off to a good start, then it's no problem. Then he's not the pressure point. But that's the thing is, they got so many plausible options out there. I had to downgrade Fraley a little bit. I had to downgrade. I don't think even Steer. Maybe I should cut down a little bit. He played so much last year. He's not going to get. He's not. Last year there was. There's more playing time to hand out. There's not that this year.
yeah, when I'm setting, that's what it is. It's when you're setting. It all starts with setting plate appearances for these guys, and then figuring out how much they can produce per plate appearance. I've been pretty conservative with a lot of them because of the log jam, and one of the guys I've been conservative with was Marte, just in the sense of like, could he spend April in the minors, which would allow them to use third base to play other players and then get Encarnacion Strand in the lineup every day and keep India in the lineup every day. And you would say, like, why are you doing this to keep India in the lineup? But India is actually like an okay offensive player. He's not bad. Like
he was better. The problem is he's been hurt the last 2 years. He's also slightly declined each year. His rookie year was his best year.
His rookie year was his best year, but last year was a 746 OPS. That's okay.
It's cromulent.
14 steals and 119 games. Like, so that's a decent offensive player. He can run a bit. Like, he can hit them in basically anywhere in the lineup. Like, he's been their leadoff man a lot at times. And I don't know. I just feel like he's 27. He's not old. Like, if you have him, if you're not going to trade him, you probably should play him a fair amount. He's only played second base as a fielding position, but I've got to think he could play some other spots, or I don't know, or maybe he does DH. But I just wondered, like, the way teams sometimes kind of, put talent down in the minors at the beginning of the year, thinking of the long game. I wondered if Marte could start season in the minors. That relieves the log jam, and you just play the odds that by the end of April, one of the guys that we've just talked about is on the IL, and then Marte's up, and then you deal with it after that. Like most teams at most points in the season have one of their starting guys on the IL.
I'm going to make a facile comparison here, and it's going to lead to it's going to bridge us to our next topic. Okay. Also, it's similar to the whole Mike Trout. Where's Mike Trout? Who's he going to play for here? They've got options blocking him here. They've got Vernon Wells there. They've got Bobby Abreu there. At the end of the day, no one's standing in the way of that. And I think that's kind of what's going to happen with these young guys on the Reds. They'll figure it out. They'll figure out a way to make it work out.
So you're saying, I think I get it now. You're saying Marte is the next Mike Trout. I got it.
That's exactly what I was saying. Like I said, facile comparisons for 1,000, Alex. Yes, precisely what I was saying there. Yeah. Let's talk a little Mike Trout though, because this is the lowest he's ever gone. Average in the last month, his ADP in the NFBC is 63. Mike Trout is at 63 right now. Yeah. My rankings actually have him lower than that. I've got him like at 80.
Me too.
I feel it feels sacrilegious.
Yeah.
I feel like I owe it to him to have him a little bit higher, but not only do we have the usual health concerns and the lack of running, blah, 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 but the team context around him sucks. I mean, sorry to use that language, but it's so bad. There are some interesting players, some interesting players in the Angels, but this is a sad team. This is going to be a really bad team this year.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And in a really bad, like, if they find any, I think, glimmers of hope. Well, I guess I see some in the lineup maybe, but I see them maybe more in some young pitchers that could improve.
Right.
That lineup is like, yeah, it's not good. It's not the worst in baseball because that's Mike Trout, but
Yeah.
Like when you just look
Oakland's
at
worse, but still.
yeah, Luis Rengifo ahead of him in the lineup. Anthony Rendon's going to miss most of the season. Let's just assume that right from the get-go.
Yeah.
Like we don't know how or why, but he will. Brandon Drury, like meh, like but a middle of the order bat. Like Taylor Ward's solid baseball player, but again,
but he had
like,
a big come down last year.
He did, yeah. And then beyond that, like Logan O'Hoppe could actually be a pretty valuable fantasy catcher. He could hit 20 home runs. But that again, but in a real baseball perspective, like he's not a huge lineup member. Like I don't know, it's a bad lineup. It's a bad lineup, and then Mike Trout gets hurt every year. The problem is like often when I would project Trout, I would be like, well, he gets hurt a lot, so I'm only going to project him for like 120 games, 125 games. But the 125 games are going to be awesome. Like in those 125 games, he's going to hit 35 or 40 home runs. Well, last year he played 82 games. He hit 18 home runs. You know, you prorate that out to 125 games. It's actually not that many home runs, and he doesn't steal bases at all. He hit 263 last year. That's the other huge change is, you know, that 263 sticks out. He hasn't done anything like that since his rookie season.
Yep.
It's just, there's just nothing. Everything's trending down as long as he's on the Angels. He's coming off not a great year. He gets hurt all the time. His lineup stinks. I'm going to pass on him. Like when you said pick 63, so he'll be there around the 4 or 5 turn when we pick in labor. And like, I don't think either one of us are going to take him.
He may not be there. He may be there in our next round of picks too. It's possible. We'll see.
Yeah.
I've got him for 116 games. I still have him hitting 30 homers.
Okay. But then the RBI and the run scored totals just can't be that great in that amount of games in that offense.
Too.
That's right.
Yep.
So, and at 30 homers, like it's just not. Yeah. So I have him around 30 homers too, but I have the RBI and the run totals around 70. And
yeah, I've got 69 RBI, 78 runs, but that feels kind of heavy actually.
It's not very good for a 5th round pick. And then the
3
batting average is now
bases.
and then the batting average is now just fine. Like maybe it's 270, 280. It's like it's not 300 anymore. Like I said, it used to be you were like, well, he's going to get hurt or he might get hurt, but when he's healthy, I'll probably get 35 or 40 homers and a 300 average. But
yeah,
now you're not. So I don't. It sucks. He's the best player in this generation, right? But
yeah, and yeah, it's just
he still has a career OPS around 1,000.
Yeah,
like
he's amazing. He's had a great career. Just doesn't.
Can they just please trade him? They're not going to. They already said they're not going to. But
at least not this offseason. They need him to be lighting it up and then trade him. I think that's probably it there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. Here's something we may not agree on. Miami Marlins.
Okay.
I'm very cynical about the Miami Marlins. This is a team that got outscored last year but made the playoffs. And then the extent of their offseason. Here's
there is no offseason.
Here are their offseason additions this year. Trey Mancini. That's it. Sorry, there's no more. Just Trey Mancini. That's it. That's all they added this offseason.
So far. I don't think they're done. But so
Anytime now, guys.
I think, well, I could say that about a bunch of teams. There's still a lot of free agents out there that are going to sign here in the next 3 weeks or so. Hopefully next 10 days, but they won't. We know that. Drives us nuts. Baseball offseason is still driving me nuts. Like, how do we, no other sport is like this. Like, we're right knocking on the door of spring training and like really, really good players are still unsigned. Like, it's just, and again, now we have stability. Like we talked about, we have rule stability, we've got financial stability, we've got health stability, like in society, like sign these guys. Come on. Cody Bellinger, Jordan Montgomery, some of these guys are really good baseball players. Sign them. Who wants them?
Blake Snell still out there. Jorge Soler,
the baseball
former Marlin.
Stinks. Like it does. It absolutely stinks. It used to be great. Like most of the guys would sign in November, and then we'd have winter meetings, and there'd be some trades.
Well, the winter meetings was a bigger deal back then.
It was. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we go into like kind of a lull, like every other sport. The guys sign and there's some trades, and then there's just a lull where you just ignore the sport for a while, and then you get ready for the start of training. But this baseball offseason, we're just like we're gonna go into spring training and have good players not signed. There will be good players not signed till March.
Yeah, it used to be that we'd sweat one player by the magazine deadline.
Yeah,
which is basically this week.
Yeah.
And I remember, then one time like Victor Martinez ripped his knee up in off-season workouts, and that we had to change everything while we're at the FSTA conference in Vegas and all that. We're like changing everything there. Joe Sheehan has made a good point about this. That one of the reasons why other sports have a more compressed signing period is because they have a cap, and because they have a limited salary pool. Now, I think we have a similar a de facto cap with these luxury taxes.
Yeah.
So I still think there's a limited pool of money out there, and some teams just don't even come close to spending that. Hello, A's, Pirates, other teams out there that never even spend up anywhere close. There's no salary floor is the problem. But if you wanted to have, in basketball, there's a limited pool of money that they have to go and get. And so that's why, like, I think you notice like the top 3 free agents are all Boris clients, and he likes to drag it out. A lot of it's not just on the teams, it's on the agents too.
Yep. Absolutely. Assuming these guys have been offered contracts and right. Or at least had phone calls where Boris throws out these ridiculous numbers and then they're like, okay, well, forget it then.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, hey, can I sign your guy? Well, yeah, but for X. And they're like, oh, well, never mind.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Exactly. So you're still optimistic though on the Marlins. I am not.
I think that the Marlins can pitch. And I think sometimes we get a little too, in baseball, we all get a little too wrapped up in lineups. I think the Marlins can pitch. Like, I think Luzardo could be really good. Perez could be really good. We'll see. I like Braxton Garrett. Edward Cabrera, I haven't totally given up on. I don't like him in fantasy because he walks so many batters. But from real life perspective, we'll see if Trevor Rogers can bounce back. His projections actually on some of the projection systems are pretty good. I kind of like the bullpen. Like, I think they have some interesting arms in there. Like, Tanner Scott's been pretty good, and Nardi was good last year. Puck was, I think
their best 3, maybe even 4 relievers are all lefty. It's all lefties,
but they have Anthony Bender, who's not bad, who's a righty. And if you're going to have to go out and get a guy, it's easier to get a righty than a lefty.
True.
And then in their lineup, I just see like if Jazz Chisholm could stay healthy, big if, but he's shown like some real potential the last couple of years. He just can't stay healthy. Jake Berger could be a 30 homer guy. Josh Bell, like, who knows? He goes through these stretches of goodness or badness or whatever. But Luis Arias is a way better real life baseball player than a fantasy player. He's good in fantasy, but not like he is in real life because of his ability to get on base. Brian De La Cruz is okay. It's not an amazing lineup, but I think if they added,
that's an understatement. I still think it's a bad lineup.
Here's what I'll say. I like their pitching staff, and I think the lineup has some glaring holes that could be easily addressed. And maybe they won't address them, but if they
like a shortstop
and DH, if they got a shortstop and a DH or a shortstop and an outfielder, like, I think they would be.
Who's the shortstop they're going to get though?
Could they just get Ahmed Rosario? Like, he's probably way better than John Birdie goes back to utility.
Yeah. Okay. He is out there. That's another free agent that's still out there. You're right.
And I don't think he's super expensive. Like, if they added Ahmed Rosario and Jorge Soler, I think they would be really cooking with gas with that pitching staff. Again, the pitching staff's not like incredible. I don't know. I just see this. I feel like people are out on them. I think they're going to hang around, and because they can pitch, I think they're going to hang around in the wild card race. They're not going to threaten the Braves, but I think they'll hang around in the wild card race, especially if they just add. And because they haven't done anything this offseason, I feel like maybe they're primed in the next few weeks to just add a couple guys who are just solve those absolutely glaring holes. I don't know. Maybe I'm too optimistic on them, but
Tim Anderson or Ahmad Rosario, who do you got as a available free agent shortstops?
I'll take Rosario. I think he's just, I don't know what Tim Anderson is anymore. So if I'm a team like the Marlins and I like need a guy and like I don't have the money, just if he doesn't work out, I gotta have to go get someone else mid-season or something. Like, I think I'll just take Rosario. Rosario won't be awesome, but he won't be terrible either. Like, Cleveland batted him in the top 2 or 3 spots in their lineup a lot in the last few years.
Okay, is that something that speaks more about Cleveland than Rosario, or?
Yeah, I don't know. I think Rosario can be just for them. Like, okay, he's younger. I think, he's younger, but with experience. I think he could just be like, okay. But yeah, he's certainly not a good hitter. His career OPS is 708. So he's a pretty average hitter who can steal some bases. But in their lineup, if he was hitting like 7th, like, that's fine. to me. Like, that's fine. I don't know. I just see maybe Arias, Josh Bell, Jazz Chisholm, like as a top 3 could be okay if Jazz Chisholm stays healthy. I don't know. Maybe I'm too fantasy swayed on Jazz Chisholm too, just because.
I think the price is right on Jazz Chisholm this year. I actually I will get him in some leagues for the first time ever. He's going in the 60s right now. Last year he was going like 15, 20 picks earlier. So I'm willing to pay it here, but I don't know. I don't know.
Maybe I'm too optimistic on the Marlins. It's more the pitching staff. Like, I could just see, I just feel like that could be a good pitching staff. I think there's some potential there.
Yeah.
I think obviously has oodles of potential.
Yeah, that's true. We have some news today. We're not going to get to all of our bullet points on our outline, by the way. I know this shocks you.
Same for next week.
Exactly. They're evergreen content here. Bobby Witt signs a big long-term deal. Jose Altuve signs a contract extension. Interesting to see some guys get their coin. I'm happy for that. There, happy to see like the Royals spend some money. This is the biggest contract easily that they've ever spent. Your reaction?
That's great. I think signing Bobby Witt was super smart for them. I think the price was fair. He has opt-outs. So at first I was like, Bobby Witt, are you sure you want to commit to this franchise for that long? But it has opt-outs. So I don't think it has any opt-outs till he's about 30. So it's going to take him through his 20s. So good for him. He's paid. He's set for life. He's made a ton of money. He'll be the leader of that franchise. Hopefully that franchise can get on track. They have not made, effective personnel moves in the last many years.
Right.
It's hard to believe that less than 10 years ago they won a World Series.
Right. I know.
It's because since then I feel like everything they do is wrong. But
yeah. They had a 2-year run because the year after they were competitive. The year before they were competitive, and the year before, so a 3-year run. And the year after they were competitive too. I remember they traded for Johnny Cueto from the Reds there, and the Reds got a bag of beans for him too. That didn't work out for the Reds, but it's still, I'm happy to see they got a new owner about 4 years ago, and this is good that he's spending some money. They got to figure out if they can develop pitching. The Cole Reagan's experience so far is a promising sign. We'll see what they do with their, how they kind of go, but they had like a whole generation of draft pick pitchers that all failed, like Asa Lacy, guys like that just never developed. And some, a couple of them are still in the organization, but they got to figure out development a lot better. Because, yes, they signed Witt, and good for them that they kept their own. And they actually spent some money on like Seth Lugo and Michael Wacha this offseason. So they're not the White Sox. They're not the A's. They're not the Pirates. Good for them for that, at least.
So for me, my view on them is the opposite of the Marlins. I feel like people are a little in on them because they signed Wacha, Lugo, Hunter Renfroe, Adam Frazier, Garrett Hampson. Those are 5 guys they signed that are all supposed to be on the opening day roster. I don't know. I kind of looked at all that and was like stuck my nose in the air. Oh, sorry, Will Smith. Let's not forget about him.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know. I didn't like it. I don't really like it. I'd almost rather they just forget all those guys. They signed like 1 good guy or something, or 2 good guys, or I don't know, or pretty good guys instead of all of those guys. I don't know. I didn't.
But is that possible? Can they do that though? Let me ask, what guy that qualifies as that is going to sign with the Royals over another team?
No, it's true. I'd have to sit and add up the money. I'd have to go back and look at how much players will usually sign where they get paid. I don't know.
That's true. That's true. I mean, but they will have to overpay to win. No, I mean, that's absolutely my point. And Yamamoto's never going to the Royals. Let's just put it that way.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Would Jordan Montgomery go to the Royals? Maybe. If that's who paid him the most.
If they give him that extra year, and that's true. That
like that level. But that's way, in my opinion, way above Seth Lugo. Way above Mike Wacha.
Well, he is, but the question is, but that's still whether they can do that. If he still will sign with them, that's what sort of market is that? Are they just going to get used as like, hey, this team is offering this, and then some other contender comes and says, okay, we'll match that, and then he goes there, and then the Royals get nothing because then Lugo signed somewhere else and Lugo on his merits interests me some.
Okay. Okay, so you're kind of buying it on him. I
A
will
little
give the
bit.
Royals credit that like they're, like you said, they're now not the White Sox, and they if you want to get a guy like Bobby Witt to commit to your team through the rest of his 20s, like you may have to show him some signs that you're not the White Sox. So they've created maybe a bit of a floor. I
Mm-hmm.
still think maybe they're only the fourth best team in their division, but they've created a bit of a floor to like be bad but not embarrassing, bad but not terrible, like below average but
Right.
not completely.
Is that a worthy goal? Is the question then?
I don't know. Maybe it's all part. We'll see. Like it's not our money, so and these aren't
Mhm.
long-term contracts, so maybe it's all part of the process of digging yourself out of
Yeah.
the basement, right? To
And
just
part of their problem is their farm system, which was one point considered to be like, oh, they're loaded. It's not anymore.
no,
If
yeah,
you, in fact, it's the opposite of that. If you look at James Anderson's prospect rankings, they don't have anybody in the his top 150.
wow.
Hear that again. No one in the top 150. That's barren. Holy crap. I didn't realize it was
Yeah.
that bad.
Did anyone
Um,
tell this to Bobby Witt before he signed that contract?
Well, Bobby Witt and Vinny P were the two guys, were guys that were
Yeah.
supposed to help lift them up. It's the pitching. Again, it's all these
Oh yes,
investments that they
absolutely.
had
Yeah.
on the pitching side that just didn't pan out. Whether it's as I mentioned, Asa Lacey, who I don't think he's even going to make the majors. Daniel Lynch hasn't
Mhm.
worked out. Jordan Kowar, Jackson
Yes,
Kowar,
Jackson
excuse me.
Kowar.
Chris
Yeah.
Bubich is hurt,
Alec
unfortunately.
Marsh.
Bubich looked like the guy that might be that guy last year, and then he got
Yeah.
hurt. And so
Yeah.
now we'll never know. Our James's top rated prospect is Blake Walters, and he's at 158. The next guy's at 280. It's not even like they have a slew
Oh,
of guys in the like the 100 to 200 range or anything
yeah.
like that. Holy cow.
It's terrible.
That's
So I
foreboding.
guess maybe maybe in a glass half full scenario, they can trade Seth Lugo and Michael Waka for some prospects at the deadline. If they're healthy, they won't get anyone amazing for them. But if those guys are both healthy, they're serviceable number 4 starters, on contending teams. Maybe they can get something for them at the deadline.
How do
So
they
they
not
get them
even have like a guy that was drafted first round last year is like in that
right.
class?
Yeah. How do they not have? You're right, because they've been not very good for a few years. Like, how do they not have some studs that they took really high in the last 2 or 3 years? Right, like a few of
Yeah.
them. I don't know.
Like I'm trying to look to see who did they take last year. And just maybe I'm underrating,
Like Bobby Witt was drafted way back in 2019, so there were players drafted in 2020, 2021, etc.
Yeah.
22.
I mean,
Like, how are there not some studs based on how bad they've been?
yeah. So Blake Mitchell was a catcher as picked 8th overall. James doesn't look upon him too kindly. Doesn't
Okay.
have him in his top 400. And he was the 8th pick in the draft. So he panned that pick, obviously, pretty much there. And then if you look, he did struggle last year in the minors. He had a 599 OPS in only 13 games as an 18-year-old. But yeah, he's known for being a plus catcher receiver, but not necessarily a hitter. That's kind of a problem when you've got a top 10 pick in the draft.
Yeah, you should probably aim higher than that. Yeah, I don't know. It just seems like the Royals are signing Bobby Witt's great. They're really far away from contending, even to win the division, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyways,
Yeah.
sorry to end on such a downer. I think we're going to end on that note though, and we'll save a lot of our other stuff for future podcasts. We can rip on the Giants next time. For instance, we don't have to, we can take our time doing that. Same with the Padres. Oh, Padres. So yeah, we've got, I mean, I understand that I wanted, I was happy that they tried to go for it. It's a shame that they didn't get the results because I want teams that go for it to be rewarded. But
Yeah.
we'll discuss that more later. Guys, great stuff for those of you that were streaming with us and commenting in the chat. Super appreciate it there. We'll do a lot more Q&A as the season goes along. Big thanks to Fantrax for sponsoring us there. And again, you want to, if you got a dynasty league and you want to just check it out for free, go ahead, check it out. Fantrax.com/RotoWire. And I'm excited. We're back, baby. It's fun talking baseball. So every Tuesday, unless I'm traveling for work or something, Fred and I will be here together. We'll probably have a different host with Fred next week. So, because I'll be at the FSGA conference in Vegas next week. But on Thursday, I'm going to have Eric Halterman here. We're going to talk about the new RotoWire Roundtable rankings that'll be up on the site by then. Thanks everybody for listening. Take care.